Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This is Ben Altman. So I watched someone who I really recommend if you like our podcast, because I think he does what we do, but way better, is Daniel Schmachtenberger. So a lot of the things that I hear about people like about ours is that we're thoughtful. We try not to be straight down party lines, have ideas that you might not have heard represented before. At least I try to, and sometimes succeed. He's awesome. So he was on, I think this guy, Dr. Z, is the name of the podcast, or the guy.
Okay.
And they had a 2-hour talk, which is great. A handful of things that I wrote, one of which we've sort of touched on before, but he used the term subclinical mental illness, which I really like, to describe some people's experience and what I think is the state of society at large with regards to narcissism. So subclinical just means below the diagnosable threshold, but still tending in that direction. So you could have subclinical back pain, or, subclinical.
Yeah, subclinical Asperger's, subclinical narcissism, subclinical sociopathy. Gotcha.
Yes. And he talks about the interaction of technology and psychology and how it affects us, which in even more interesting ways, I think, than like the social dilemma, for example. But that one of the things he says is that the speed that social media adapts to your tastes, as opposed to the opposite, you adapting to its taste, is the opposite of the human condition for many, many years. Like if you like soft ground, that's not what the world gives you. If you like soft ground, you have to learn to deal with the hard ground or put a tremendous amount of effort into whatever, shoveling and grinding it out.
You got to learn how to make the ground soft.
But if you don't like something on social media, it adapts to you. And so we have created, according to him, and I buy this, these technologies that cater so quickly to our preferences that they form and cultivate subclinical narcissism, which is this self-absorption and belief that the world ought to and can accommodate itself to you. Now, the problem is... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have an addendum, but you finish.
Just that the problem is that people are not like that. Like social media is like that. What it shows you is like that. But when you encounter humans, they do not adapt to you nearly as quickly as your feed does.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is adapt to you is a funny way of phrasing it, because social media doesn't adapt to your making you happy or feel good or fulfilled. It will adapt to making you enraged or feeling like you're right. But it is not actually adapting in a way that is necessarily good for you.
Yes, and he talks about that, which is,
like if you're super physically insecure and so you're looking at people that are beautiful, it's going to feed you more people that are beautiful. That'll make you more insecure. If you're insecure about wealth and so you follow influencers that have more money than you, it's not going to feed you the people in Africa that are dying to get water so that you can feel grateful for your life. It's going to keep feeding you the shit that makes you feel bad, but that you're seeking out.
Yes. Interestingly enough, things that you can't stand and things that hurt you are not synonymous. Like, you might be addicted to photos. In fact, many people are, that make them feel FOMO.
Yes.
But if there's something you truly can't stand, which for many people is a well-reasoned opposing opinion, that will get shuffled out very, very quickly, because that is something you actually have no tolerance for.
But also, they've done studies, social media, the things that gets the most engagement are things that enrage you. So if you see a sad story of someone less fortunate than you, it may actually make your day better in a weird way, because it'll make you sad temporarily and then grateful for the rest of the day. But you don't engage with it as much. So social media goes, oh, this isn't what we're going to give this person more of.
Yeah.
So it's not... It would be great if it were actually designed to adapt to your long-term growth and fulfillment, but it's not.
That's what he talks about, and it sounds a bit utopian, but he kind of lays it out. He's like, look, if we allow capitalism, which is fantastic, to run in the direction that it is very clearly not interested in human flourishing.
Yeah.
And there are, like, markets are super efficient at limbic hijack and... Go ahead. I see you.
Well, no, I was going to say, this may sound obvious, but the reason I say this is because I don't think social media's problem is that it adapts to you and the ground doesn't. Because if the way it adapted to you was it saw you looking at people who were on steroids or who were, if it saw you having body dysmorphia stuff and started feeding you genuine fitness information, or it saw you raging about gun control, and so it gave you statistics that were meant to center you more about gun control, or pick your issue, COVID. Like, it could adapt to you in a way that made you calmer, more thoughtful, more well-reasoned, showed you the nuance of the other side. Like, you could imagine it adapting to you very quickly in a way that made you a better person for society. But you wouldn't use that app because you prefer the app that makes you feel right and makes you mad at the other side. So I don't know that it's the adapting to you part. It's the way in which it adapts to you.
Adapts to your like reptile brain.
Yes, it adapts to the things that make you in crowd, out crowd, hate other people and feel really vindicated in your own beliefs, and hides all the good counter arguments to what you believe from you. Yeah. So it's the way it adapts to you.
Yes, and that's something that he talks about. Is like, look, we've got this brain. It's not changing anytime soon until we get like hyper Neuralink in there. So we're kind of stuck with this technology. We have, he says it, I think we've got Stone Age biology, industrial age systems, and godlike technology. and it's just not working well together. But his question is, can we set up a system whereby those systems are more up to date, such that they are in tune with human flourishing? And of course, the problem is that as soon as one company defects from that, like you could imagine if everybody agreed, like, hey guys, no more enrage bait, no more bullshit.
Yeah, people would switch off the app. If in order to watch a guy talk about his Lamborghini, you had to watch a kid walk to dirty water, you would just go, no, I don't want to be reminded of how good I have it. I'm looking to feel envy.
And what he does talk about is like, you could imagine a social media that was not as addictive as our social media, but still competitive compared to life, that or compared to staring at paint dry or whatever.
Yeah, it'll just get crushed by the current. It'll just get crushed by whatever's
as soon as
currently
there's
happening.
one defector that goes, I'm not going to play that game.
Yeah, and the reason I think that is because if I thought that a social media engineered around making you feel grateful and educating you would do better, I think it would exist and do better. So I'm just looking at the evolution of social media and going, that's clearly a losing strategy. Yeah. Otherwise, someone would go make $10 billion off of it.
Yeah. So and this is, a long time criticism of capitalism, is that it's a game of, what is it called? I don't know. It's not outsourcing. It's setting up externalities that you don't have to pay for. So like if Facebook suffered financially every time that they had someone make a poor life decision as a result of their products.
That'd be awesome. Or every time, if every time somebody opened up Instagram and then closed it, and they had more depression or anxiety or jealousy, more negative emotions than they did prior, Instagram was forced to pay a financial penalty. It'd be awesome.
Well, you would instantaneously transform the thing. So
the algorithm would change. It would stop giving you the stuff that was meant to enrage you and meant to make you think that the world was against you or whatever it is.
Yes. And so his point about capitalism, which is not a point that he made first, is that a lot of the game is in just creating externalities, whether that's pollution that you don't have to clean up, whether that's financial risk, which you get the public to pay for while you privatize the gains. And so many of our problems can be pointed to our inability to get actors to internalize the negative externalities which they currently create in our system. So he asked the question, how can we do that? And I was watching a video today actually that reminded me of that. Have you seen the primitive technology videos?
Yeah. I was going to bring this up last night.
You saw the Sunny V2, great video. He makes very, very good videos, and always just interesting and new in their own way. But he talks about what you probably suspect is that there's these new primitive technology videos, which is like two guys in Cambodia and they're like digging a hole, and then next scene it's an 8-foot hole that is carved like an excavator came in, and then they make these impossibly blue slides in allegedly 100 days, and he goes through the videos and shows that one, you can see excavators in the background, that you can see tracks, that there's drone footage of 12 people on site.
Yeah, they say it's 2 people that did it in 100 days, and really it's 15 people that did it in a week with tools. And that's not impressive. It's the same pool that got built in the suburban backyard wherever you grew up. They're just pretending that they did it with sticks.
Yes. And so externalities of that is just like, okay, so now primitive technology is not getting as many, the guy who started this whole thing, who does it himself, who literally just goes into the Australian outback and like chops
he's legit.
trees with
You can tell
flint.
he's legit because when he builds a hut,
a mud hut with a fireplace, like a kiln, that he is getting fewer views than them on it. Oh yeah, the top view of these videos is insane.
Wow.
It's hundreds of millions of views.
I thought he was still doing okay.
He's doing fantastic, but that they have surpassed him and eclipsed him, and I see them pop up more often probably because I clicked one time. And then probably another time because it was spectacular and I wasn't thinking clearly. that he also shows that it's unclear if it's private or public land, but they build these things which they lie about building that no one actually uses, and then you can see the abandoned ruins of these places that have like litter and stuff around them. So this entire it was just, I watched Andrew Schmachtenberger, and you see this facade, this beautiful facade, and then this like gross, ugly backside of it. And what is the product that is created? A false image in the minds of millions of people. Mm-hmm. Like, it's pure, I guess there's some enjoyment, but it's a lot of negative externality that is created by this. I also thought of Chris Hemsworth's PED stack in Thor, which like maybe sells more tickets because he's yoked, but probably contributes to giving millions of men's body dysmorphia and other actors that work out hard not stacking up against him unless they also use PEDs. So it's just this, one of the things that has a ton of negative externalities is lying. And I thought of that when I watched Thor. And you were like, yeah, his face was pretty leathery.
It's such a shame. It's such a shame because I actually don't even think it's necessary. I don't know. I feel like you could just get naturally jacked people to play these superheroes, or not even, let me rephrase that. You just get Chris Hemsworth to his peak natural physique, and I think people would still like the movie. Mm-hmm. I actually don't think that it helps the movie to have him be on steroids. Mm-hmm. I don't know anyone who bought it because they wanted to see him be more jacked than a regular 230-pound, 6'3" guy who works out a lot and eats right.
Yeah.
So,
you watch some of those videos. It seems so strangely, it's like the lie. Here was my question. I guess there must be a section of society that is not realizing that they're all on, not all, that many of the superheroes and
you're saying, let's use the most extreme one. Why can't Dwayne Johnson say I'm on steroids, or I'm not on steroids, I'm on GRT or HGH or whatever, like whatever you want to call it, that cuts out from your little Venn diagram, whatever you think steroids are. Yeah. Why does he have to pretend that it's because he eats so much chicken breast? I don't know the answer, because you would think that most people know that The Rock with that body is on something besides chicken breast and rice.
Well, then I realized if he hasn't told people, either he's slow or I'm not in touch with mainstream understanding of steroids. So perhaps this YouTube community of people who see More Plates, More Dates or Philly-on just, commenting on this stuff and laughing at it. And I don't agree with every take they have on who's on steroids, who's not, but that mainstream society just is not there. They believe that it is possible. I don't know.
I genuinely don't know, because I don't imagine that anybody would stop watching. If you're a fan of The Rock and you're already seeing his movies, you go see Red Notice with him and Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds. I don't know anybody who would skip it if they found out that he is injecting something to make him so muscular. Mm-hmm. That's hard for me to imagine.
I agree. There was someone that we knew in Vegas. A lot of people that we knew in Vegas had plastic surgery, but there was one girl who had many plastic surgeries. And
there were many women who had many plastic surgeries.
Then she posted a photo of herself that said all natural, no, you know what I mean? Like, do you think that people believe this?
I actually do think, you're talking about someone that we're all acquaintances with, but no one was close to. I do think that people believe her, because most people don't live in Vegas, LA, New York City. They don't see a lot of plastic surgery. And I think they just assume that these things are occurring naturally, that are only obviously plastic surgery if you know enough people who have had plastic surgery that you can see the signs, or you can tell, like, oh, that's fake. Yeah. But I think you get that from thinking something's natural and then finding out it's fake, which only happens if you're friends with or dating people who have gotten plastic surgery. Yeah.
Well, Schmachtenberger talks about it, and he adds systems and interesting names to things that you've probably intuited, but I think that gives a deeper understanding. He talks about the epistemic commons, which is the way that you can have a park, which is like the physical commons, and somebody who refuses to like take their trash home and throw it out can litter in the commons and degrade the commons. That's what lies do to the epistemic commons. Mm-hmm. So like my ability to make sense of the world and what's true and what's false is degraded every time that someone around me tells a semi-convincing lie, or even a lie that I catch. Now I have to be suspicious to a degree. of everybody else.
Yeah, because some people go the other direction. I've seen people who are like, oh, that guy's definitely on steroids. You know, that's just a muscular 185
well, this was
pound
upsetting
guy.
to you because you got this.
Well, no, I actually thought you got this, which was the one I was
Me?
more. Yeah, someone thought we were on steroids. I was 6'2", 220, and I was like, okay, I'm not on steroids, but I get it. You were 6 foot.
I don't recall this.
180. And someone was like, you're on steroids. And I was like, okay, now you're just saying anyone that's in better shape than you is on steroids.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I was like, come on, people are allowed to be 180 pounds.
Yeah. I didn't eat bread for like 8 years. But
Yeah.
so I was.
And you worked out every day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so I think
never-
some people go, oh, The Rock's not on steroids, but other people go, any sort of result that I'm not achieving is caused by steroids.
Yeah, and the larger point being, which I like about Schmachtenberger, because I feel like a lot of politics can boil down to like red team, blue team, left, right, this side, that side. He has a really good way of standing above it and being like, what are the conditions of this system of opposition that make this conflict necessary? And could we change the system and the structures such that it's not red team versus blue team? It's the social media apps and the nature of our first past the post. Is it first past the post? Do you know what that means? There's ways of conducting elections. One is first past the post, which is I have to look it up. I'm gonna fuck it up. I'll set it up for next time. But you can incentivize two-party systems, or you can give people like ranked. I think it's called ranked choice voting, where you're like, look, I want number one, I want Bernie Sanders, but if Bernie doesn't win, then cast my vote for Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah.
And so what that sets up is like, you can vote for third-party candidates. I think first past the post just naturally is like, well, if I vote for Bernie, my vote doesn't fucking count.
Yeah. You don't want a system where, for whatever reason, two people that have similar beliefs run and one person with different beliefs run. And so then you have 60% of the population that broadly agrees with these two candidates. They go 30-30, and 40% of the population agrees with this other candidate, but they all go to that candidate, so that candidate wins. You don't want that.
You get these broad coalitions that don't really represent specifically a lot of people, and you could actually have viable third-party candidates if you had this different thing. So the idea that he has with almost everything is, rather than who's right, Democrats or Republicans or Instagram, Facebook, like what is going on with this system here, and how could we potentially rejigger it such that this conflict didn't have to arise?
Well, we've talked about this because I've said I think the Electoral College is outdated. I think it made sense back in the day. Someone said, I saw a comment that said I was anti-American for thinking that not every system created at our founding should still exist. Thought that was an odd take, but I think, that's an outdated thing. But the reason that you won't see it switched is because it serves someone. It serves a party, right? And then the second, let's say that simultaneously, I'll pick two things. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Texas and another state both start going blue on the Electoral College. And so now if the populace is voting 52% Democrat, but the election is swinging 63% electoral votes towards Democrat, the Democrats will suddenly like the Electoral College. And so they've been saying we should change the system.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the system is serving them, they will stop because they don't feel as strongly about the principle that the Electoral College is outdated as they do the desire to get control of the political machine that is U.S. politics. And I think that's true of their voters as well. So all these people saying, oh, the Electoral College is unfair, if it swung their way, would just stop saying that.
Likely would have think, well, it's our turn. We feel justified. There'd be reasons.
And so the problem is then the people put in power by the system don't often change the system. It's the people that aren't getting what they want from the system that try to change it, and those are not the people with the power to change the system. You end up, and I'm just calling this now, this is going to happen. All these people who are saying we should get rid of this and go to a populist vote, once it's serving them, they're going to say, yeah, well, it's okay. We'll just keep it for now.
Yes, 100%. That's it. And then you see people that do have power, like Marcus Aurelius, and throughout history, they're rare, that are not totally corrupted by it, and it's like miraculous.
Look at UFC fighters. UFC fighters need a union. Yeah. Every other major sport has a players union. You can't make a fighters union unless all the top fighters get on board and essentially do what LeBron and Steph Curry do, which is take pay cuts for everyone else. Because in an open market, LeBron and Curry would make a lot more money. But the fighters scrap their way through being underpaid for their entire career, getting paid $5,000 to, fight brutally, make it to the top, and then it's their chance to make the tens of millions of dollars for a brief period of time before they are washed. We've seen with Chris Weidman and Conor McGregor. And so these guys, it's a flash in the pan. They don't, when they're at the top, band together and effectively cut their own pay for the sake of the collective. And it's just, it's not the people who have the power to change a system that's benefiting them often don't change the system. So you get is a lot of fighters clamoring for a union, and Dana White just says, I'll just cut you because you don't matter.
Yeah.
And John Jones and Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, the 6 fighters that would just have to get together and say, we won't fight until you make a union, don't do it because they're benefiting from not having a union.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I don't know how it happened in basketball, but I don't think any of those fighters would have demanded to escape a union if a union existed. It's almost that people will accept that it's very tough to change the status quo. But once you're in it, like LeBron is not demanding to get out of the union, though I don't know that he'd be setting up a union if he came into a league without it.
That's interesting to look into why those do occur, because they certainly do hurt the top players. The max contracts, it's an artificial thing to cap how much money all the max players make. Any person with a max contract is taking a pay cut for the union.
I'd have to learn more about like the history of the NBA and all that kind of stuff.
One reason could be that the owners did it because the owners want a salary cap for their teams, because otherwise Steve Ballmer has a massive advantage. You see this sometimes in European football or soccer, is if you have an owner with $40 billion, another owner with $1 billion, and there's no salary cap on the team, then it's just whoever has the richest owner will win. Yeah. Having rich owner is already a big advantage because they can pay the luxury tax. So it's possible that the owners got together and said, okay, there's one Steve Ballmer with $40 billion. A lot of us only have $1 billion. Let's have caps for our team. Yeah. And then a natural outflow of that might have been max caps on the players.
Yeah.
That's my hypothesis, but I could be totally wrong.
You know, what's interesting is that you mentioned you're like LeBron is taking a pay cut. And there is a sense in which if the league was opened up or disbanded, that he is taking a pay cut. But in that other example that you talked about with like Steve Ballmer could just buy everything, there is a point at which the system tips and the league is ruined. There's no more competition.
Yes.
And so like this is the thing that you want, is you want people to be fairly compensated in a system that accurately tracks second and third order effects of the incentives, which is like, if we pay LeBron all the money, there's no one to play.
Well, I think this does happen in soccer, though, doesn't it, in Europe?
I don't know.
I think there's a couple clubs that have much higher payrolls than other clubs, and it hasn't ruined it completely. So,
got it.
I agree with you. I mean, that sounds like what would happen, but I think it has managed to not happen in certain sports, and I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, then there's not. It's not simply. I guess it's not simply a tracking of where value is being created and getting misallocated. It's just this guy wants more, and that guy wants more, and who's right? You could conceive of a world in which the league exists and people enjoy sports in both of them. So there's, that's, I guess, a big tension between socialism and capitalism, you know. But I say them with the squiggle at the end because I don't think we've ever had pure either of those, those systems. So what else you got?
I saw something crazy that I actually had to research today just to make sure I hadn't gotten it wrong. Arizona passed a crazy bill about video police. Have you heard this?
No.
Probably because I said it very terribly. But basically, they made it illegal to video record within 8 feet of a law enforcement activity unless you have the police officer's permission. So if a crime is occurring...
Are you sure this isn't a headline? just to clarify.
Yeah, look it up. It's a bill.
Wow.
So, yeah, the guy who passed it is Republican State Representative John Kavanaugh. He's the bill's sponsor. And he says he's pleased that a very reasonable law that promotes the safety of police officers and those involved in police stops has been signed into law. His argument is that this protects the safety of police officers, which makes no sense to me. But it doesn't sound that bad at first because you go, okay, just record the arrest from more than 8 feet away. Mm-hmm. Except if a police officer takes a step towards you, then you have to take a step backwards. Uh-huh. So if there's multiple police officers, they can just walk towards you. And then if you don't stop recording or step back, they can arrest you for a misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor is not a felony, but it can be 10 days in jail and $1,000. So it's obviously not nothing.
It's just, it doesn't make sense because if you wanted to protect the safety of police officers, the law would say if you're not involved in the incident, you can't stand within 8 feet of a police officer. You wouldn't need the part about the camera. Like, because cameras don't hurt police officers.
Yeah, well,
people interfering in, people getting too close or bumping elbows, that is what does it. So you'd write the law to protect them from the interference of people, which I believe already exists and is probably well established. The fact that cameras need to be involved.
Yeah, it's wild, right? I read it.
I struggle to imagine a steel man of that reasoning.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I also think it's unconstitutional, but the way that this will work, I believe, is that it gets passed into practice and then appealed. And so it'll have to work its way through the court systems until it eventually gets to the Supreme Court for the state, or maybe even the federal Supreme Court. So it will exist for a period of time.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. Like, I think this is straight up unconstitutional, but the system has to establish that, which means that for a period of time in Arizona, you can't record police officers with your camera phone if you're within 8 feet of them. And if they step closer to you, you have to retreat or stop videotaping them or get a misdemeanor charge.
It's funny because you would think that cameras very well could protect police officers from false accusations that he's hitting me.
Yeah, if I was a police officer, I would think that I wanted every body cam on at all times and 24/7 surveillance at all times. Give me all the evidence possible if I was a police officer. I want all the evidence of my actions, the criminals' actions, innocent people's actions. Let's get this right. Where we have, like sports have figured this out. They want more cameras and instant replay. And let's get that for our police officers. You'd think that's what you would want. You'd be hoping that people are videotaping it so that when someone says you're guilty of police brutality, you have 7 civilian videotapes that show you were lawfully arresting this person.
Now I am trying to think of the counter argument, and the one that I can come up with, which is tenuous, is that most people who have not experienced having a recording of them played out of context, and they do not understand how quickly a public can jump to conclusions about an event that they think they know about with really not understanding it.
Yeah, I agree that you can get footage that out of context looks bad. That's why I want multiple angles and body cams in addition to civilian footage.
Yeah. And that's all that I'm thinking of. And the other thing that I think people will have to get used to is that there's a lot of one of the things that gets people not legally in trouble with video, but socially in trouble is bad words, mean tone, those sorts of things, which are incredibly common. I think a lot of the people canceling people for bad words would have their shit shut down immediately if there were a camera on them, if they were a Twitch streamer 24/7. So there's this selective enforcement as we transition from 1990 when there's no camera footage of anybody to 2020 when there's quite a bit on certain people and still very little on others.
And I could be wrong, but I believe, for instance, there was that police officer that shot a girl who was trying to stab another girl.
And he was exonerated.
And the public at first went at him. Out of context information was leaked and people were like, this is unacceptable. And then the full context came out. And I think very quickly that was completely dropped. I actually don't think that stuck with him the way certain other accusations might come out and then the redaction doesn't get the same traction. So I think in the case of this kind of police brutality that people, once they get the context, do drop the vitriol.
Yeah, no, trust me, I agree. You probably want more ability to review the situation, and video provides that. So the idea that you would want to reduce that seems only to protect the overreach of police officers because it's not the private citizens who have the advantage in those interactions. So,
I just thought it was crazy. I think the one exception is if you're the person being arrested, you're allowed to record yourself. Really? But then obviously they just handcuff you and then you lose the ability to record yourself. So that's why it's so helpful to have a third party who is recording you from a distance. So you can record the police officer, but then once they handcuff you, you've effectively lost the ability to actually record them.
Seems goofy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a real thing though. That's the crazy part to me. Is it's not a tweet that some random person without a blue check set out. It's
I'd love to know what they were thinking, or at least their reasoning. But
I just read it to you. That's a quote from the guy who signed off on the
Sure,
bill.
but that doesn't seem to be a full reasoning. Protects him how? So I don't know what he would say.
Well, these are all going to be completely unrelated, but on to the next, right? WNBA player Brittany Griner was detained in February at Moscow's airport with vape cartridges containing hashish oil, which is illegal in Russia. So I think we've already talked about this, but it came out she pled guilty to unintentionally importing narcotics into Russia.
Yep.
And has been there since February, is going to continue to be there for a while, is facing a 10-year jail sentence. It's absolutely wild. And there's also no good solution, because I see people who are saying, how is Biden letting her stay over there? They are throwing the book at her in a way they actually don't. I don't know if you know this. They don't penalize their own citizens this harshly often for this violation.
I don't know.
It's often a fine.
Yeah.
But they're in their rights to. Like this, they're not breaking the law. They're just throwing the book at her. And the request to free her has been to free an illegal arms dealer that the U.S. has in custody. So the position that Biden is in is to let her stay in Russia for months or even years, or trade her for someone who's incredibly dangerous and whose release will lead to
death, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. And we talked about going to Russia at one point because we have a very big Russian channel. And I said I didn't want to go to Russia because I was a scaredy cat.
Well, that was pre this level of tension.
Yes. This was 3 years ago.
I also am on that train right now.
Well, so I just kind of public service announcement. Don't go to countries that have very draconian laws or bad relationships with the U.S. because it can ruin your life.
Yeah.
It can just straight up ruin your life. And I believe her when she says she didn't. It's not that she thought it wasn't a big deal. I really think she had these because they're legal in the U.S. in a backpack that she took to Russia.
Yeah.
Not even considering that it might be illegal there. I really think this was just a complete accident. I don't think she was trying to break the law because she just really wanted to get high in Russia. So yeah, I loved traveling the world for years. You and I moved all to very different countries, but I think it's becoming more and more important to recognize what the legal system is of the country you're visiting and what the relationship with the U.S. is of the country you're visiting.
Yeah. Well, when I visited Singapore, they gave you warnings about drugs. They said, do not mess around with that here. There's an American that just received like 20 canings and is in the hospital. They're not going to get you out.
Yeah.
you're
that's, I think, well, that maybe is why I wanted to bring it up, and is something that I think I growing up was under the impression that the U.S. will get your back. And they will when they can. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's leave you there or release a massive arms dealer. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. isn't going to get your back.
Yeah.
And this is a famous rich person, by the way. Now imagine if you're just a regular person. Mm-hmm. So crazy. Another thing, I don't know if you saw, just in the realm of capitalism, there's now a monthly subscription to heat your BMW seats. Mm-hmm. Did you see this?
Just a headline.
So the world of microtransactions is hitting automobiles now. So there's always been upsells for stuff in cars. Like certain cars don't have the heating stuff in your seats. And you can pay extra to get a car that has the extra equipment. But this is, I think, the first time that a car has all the hardware. They're not asking you for extra money to put in extra hardware. They have put in software that limits their hardware, and you're paying them to unblock the hardware that is already in the car you purchased.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
I don't know why they don't just raise the prices of, and collect whatever boost they'd see in lifetime value of heated seats that way.
At the end of the day, maybe this is actually better for BMW customers if you don't care about heated seats, because they do have an unlimited option. So you can pay, I wrote it down, $18 a month, $180 a year, $300 for 3 years, or unlimited access to the heaters in your car for $415.
Well, maybe I could imagine that it's like, look, for some people, this is cheaper than the current option, maybe, for heated seats for 3 months in the winter. So you spend $54 a year or whatever.
But what's funny is the BMW already put in.
They're already there, yeah.
So if that's the price that you can pay to get the heater installed,
their margin is already super fat on
and use it for 3 months, that should just be the price to have the heater installed for everyone.
Yeah, we had this conversation. It's funny in a number of ways. We were talking about hardback book covers. It's like this is not a better product than a soft cover book. Soft cover books travel better. They like, you might like a hardback book on a shelf, but for almost every other use case, softback is better. And they could all come with an e-version if they wanted, because that costs next to no marginal cost. But prices are not set based on the cost of goods. They're not set. They're set based on what the market will bear. Yeah. And a lot of that is what BMW is bumping up against is tradition, history. Like, how has this been billed in the past? There are things that people don't blink twice about paying for.
Well, if they want to, this will catch on. I mean, they're already doing it in certain countries. It's not like the pushback has canceled the rollout. I just think it's funny because you could imagine if it were maybe a GPS tracking your car, you could justify it by saying, oh, they have to, if your car's in the program, it costs them more. But this is just straight up, the hardware's there. It costs them nothing to let you power it.
Well, I mean,
it's just a different financial model.
Well, I can make this argument against Charisma University, which is it doesn't cost us any money minus negligible amounts for a server. Like the margin that we have above the cost of each individual Charisma University sold is almost all of it, right? Therefore, we're completely disconnected from cost of goods sold, and we should just sell it for the amount that it costs. You know what I mean? Like, and what would my response be? Well, there's other elements of the business, and I want to pay for these videos, which I give to you for free. And that's very likely similar to what's occurring with BMW. Just like, yeah, but I'm paying for marketing to get you in my BMW, engineering to figure this kind of stuff out.
I just think it's funny because it's giving someone a piece of hardware that has a capability that has an extra piece of software to block that capability. Which is just a funny business model.
Yes. I'm trying to think if there's other stuff. Yeah, a lot of subscription services have a higher, like, when you're paying for a subscription magazine or Netflix or something like that, you're paying for the continued production of new content that fills that out. And the heated seats is not being further developed. It just is. It just sits there the way that it was on day one, but you are still paying a subscription fee that increases over time.
Yes. And I think, it's just a funny model to have someone get a piece of equipment of some kind that has functionality and then has additional stuff put in to block that functionality for certain people. Mm-hmm. I just find that to be I don't think it's morally wrong. It's a very odd business model.
I'm sure there's actually places where it's existed. I mean, I'd have to think for a few moments, but yeah, I bet you it's not. It's like newsworthy in this particular regard, but I bet you we've probably come to accept that in a lot of other places in our lives. I'd have to think of the subscriptions that I currently pay, but active campaign, like how much future engineering is required for me to send out emails, and like, does it have to be based on how many customers I have, or is that more? So Active Campaign is an email software, and it charges you more as you add more contacts. Now, is that because the servers are like, we can't handle it? Or is it because they go, these guys have 100,000 contacts, they got some money? Yeah. Like, I think, it's worth it, and they'll pay. It's like, what will the market bear seems to be how prices are set. Certainly how I set our price. I wasn't like, what's my cost of goods, and what is a slim margin above that?
Well, that's kind of how we set ours. We actually set ours also considering having a refund rate that we were comfortable with. Because the market actually would bear a higher cost for Charisma University.
Yeah.
You would charge more and people would still buy it.
If I thought that I knew the optimum price for me to make money on Charisma University, and it was higher than our current price, I would raise the prices.
That's not how you fixed the original price, though. It originally was $900. We dropped it to $600, and you didn't do any math to try to figure out if $600 made you more.
I did math. I didn't do good math, but I knew that I wasn't selling very many at that amount. It was one every 5 days when we did that.
Well, the audience was way smaller. That was pre-YouTube.
It mattered. It was not a good price for it, as from what I could tell. I didn't like crunch the numbers, but it was, I think, almost obvious from the switch that it was a better change.
Interesting. I'd be surprised, only because every person I've ever spoken to says that after they raised prices, they made more money. Now, obviously, you couldn't just make it $100,000 for an online course. It has to be anchored to the amount of value that the thing creates. But pretty much every entrepreneur that I've spoken to for a relatively new business, they're like, yeah, eventually I would had internal resistance to raising prices. And then when I raised prices, I made more money.
Yes. And that's why we set it high. And then when it came down, this is the one time that it worked better. Trust me, I did not do this out of the kindness of my heart. I was trying to make our business better. I swear to God.
That's not the pitch you gave me.
It was, we were getting too many refunds.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But that's not money.
Well, it is. So if you have a $600 product with a 20% refund rate, and then you have a $1,000 product with a 30% refund rate, you're still making more money with a higher price.
Yes. What I was picking off was that it seemed obvious that a lot of people, like I didn't do the math, but it seemed obvious that a lot of people were not feeling that it was worth that. Now, maybe I could sell the course for.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You made it a price where you felt like people would be happy that they purchased.
Yes.
And that's not maximizing.
Sure. I could charge $4 million for it and try to make one sale a year to a billionaire.
Yeah.
And, that technically could work. It would be higher volatility.
Sure, yeah.
So I preferred like higher volume of more consistent sales. But again, it wasn't from the simple, pure kindness of my heart that I made that decision.
Well, you tricked me.
Really?
Yeah.
Kindness of my heart is why you think
You told me it was because you were uncomfortable with the amount of people that weren't satisfied at the time.
Yes. And I think that also that is, I guess there is some kindness in there, but there's also business savvy, which is like if we have people buying our product and leaving dissatisfied in high amounts,
you were thinking long-term.
Yes.
You were thinking long-term health of the business.
Yes. I do think that's a bad decision to have like a huge chunk of people who interact with your product not dissatisfied.
I don't disagree. But you could make more money in the short term doing it.
Yes. And so that's what we have done consistently in our business. And I'm not trying to put us down too much. We think a lot about these things, but we think we have ethical considerations, which we do make, which is like, hey, we can't offer this product at a discount. The reason that we can't offer it at a discount is because we wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of that, and it wouldn't be fair to the customer who paid the full price, who just bought it at the end of a video for somebody on our email list to get it at half price. So that was an ethical decision, and it probably would have been better for the business if we just offer discounts. We just would make more money, period. People are used to that. They'll bear it, but we didn't like that from an ethical decision. But then I do think a lot of the other decisions we make are solid business decisions, not because they're based on what's the right thing to do here, but what's the best for long-term health of the business. Mm-hmm. And then there's a third category of people that just go, what'll make me a lot of money in the next 30 days?
Yeah, what's funny is that I actually don't know. I guess it depends on the business. Certainly influencers don't seem to be hurt by going short-term. Like Logan Paul doesn't seem to have been hurt by doing a bunch of cash grabs during the crypto frenzy.
So you're right. And if I said this, I'm not trying to say that we don't make ethical decisions in the business. Like I did, the reason that I would never offer an NFT for Charisma on Command that I didn't think was good. Again, there's businesses and ways I could imagine having a valuable NFT. Is not because I thought it was bad for the business long term. It's because I thought they were pieces of crap, speculative nonsense.
Yeah, but But I guess what I'm saying is, if you look at, you would think that lying to people about a shitcoin would devastate your goodwill with your audience and hurt your long-term success. But that is not how it played out. It almost feels like people in crypto had if you get ripped off, it's your own fault mindset. So that Tech Lead and Logan Paul and people who did things where they enriched themselves and hurt the people who participated from their audience didn't seem to get a hit in views or positive comments or online defenders. So you were able to enrich yourself, hurt your audience, but not hurt your long-term ability to enrich yourself again.
Do you think that's particular to the NFT crypto offer? Meaning like if Tech Lead had offered a cash grab course, would he have had the same scot-free outcome?
Oh, no. What I'm saying is I think there was, for some reason, a lot of the defense of that I saw is that in crypto and NFTs, there was, for some reason, this mindset of like, if you get suckered, you brought it on yourself.
So you're saying it is specific to the NFT crypto offer. Like if Logan Paul had launched, like Jake Paul did, a garbage creator course, and not supported it, and it was garbage content, you think that would have stuck with his brand and damaged him more than Dink Doink did?
I think it depends on the brand, and I think it depends on what you launch. Is probably the answer.
Yeah. Well, I think as I'm formulating now, yeah, I do think there's something particular to crypto, like you said, where people just there's like this buyer beware mentality, which is they don't lay responsibility at the foot of the influencer who is ripping them off. They're like there's some sense of, we all tried to scam each other. We knew this guy was going to get away with it, and we all played the game. So can't be mad at him.
I used to think that you paid a long-term price for short-term hurting people for money. Mm-hmm. And I have had to amend that belief to, that's not always true. You should still, I think still ethically, you shouldn't hurt the people that try to support you. But I have been surprised at the resilience of a fandom to get scammed and stay positive on someone.
Yeah. Me too.
and true with a lot of things. Like I think you could have OnlyFans supporters who think they're talking to the person and then find out that they've been talking to someone completely different because the person doesn't do any of their own messaging, and they don't necessarily turn on that person or even unsubscribe to that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's weird. There's a stickiness to some supporters, I guess.
Yes, which is a bummer. This is that you would like, especially at least in the cases where it became public knowledge, that to carry a stain that was felt financially on people.
Well, I guess if the people you're scamming don't mind, then you haven't really harmed them tremendously.
Yeah. Well, what's unfortunate is like the biggest blow to Logan Paul's ego and way of doing things and finances was when he went into that suicide forest and took a video and smiled, which I think was a lot of discomfort with the situation. To me, that was very forgivable.
Yeah, he was overly canceled. He tased a rat and people got upset while they were eating hamburgers. A dead rat, sorry. He tasted an already dead rat.
Yeah.
And people were just eating up factory farmed meat going, what a monster. How could he do that to a dead animal?
It's like, so we now live in a society where the thing that you will absolutely be wary of is saying the wrong utterance of syllables or, expressing exclusion to the wrong out group, which can just be done with words, versus scamming your entire audience has almost no effect. Ripping people off for millions of dollars doesn't follow you at all. And I think it's a bummer. God, I didn't think I'd have this much. I watched a video. Have you seen Peter Boghossian at all? He was one of the guys who did those fake studies where it's like, we followed 10,000 dogs through the parks, and we found out if their owners were homophobic based on if the male dogs were allowed to sniff male dogs' penises. Oh,
and it's all fake, but they got published.
Yeah. They published
every major journal or whatever.
And they published like Mein Kampf, and they replaced the Jews with like the capitalists, and they're like, this needs to go farther. You know what I mean? Like, like just push it more. So he's like one of the most...
That was hilarious. I don't want to breeze over that. They took Mein Kampf and they submitted it to, was it research publications?
They did it to academic publications. I don't have the specifics, but they replaced the Jews, I believe, with white men or capitalists or something, the current group that is the problem. And
the people didn't come back and say, this is outrageous. They came back and said, we love this. Can you go further?
Yes. That's what they said on Joe Rogan.
Borderline hard to believe.
Well, just to be clear, not all of, there are respected and less respected publications, but they got published everywhere. Yeah. Some of their stuff got denied, but they were able to get into just about everything. So he now is an interesting thing where he goes to college campuses, push a bunch of hash lines on sidewalks, strongly disagree on one side, strongly agree, and basically does some street epistemology where he gets students and he says, what was the one that he did? Trans women should be able to compete in traditionally women's sports, in biological women's sports. And the kids move and then they talk. And I don't know if these kids are really, really bad at defending their positions.
Yeah.
And some of them immediately jump to, you're a transphobe, this is violence, it's remarkable how, and it occurs kind of on both sides. There's a bit more open-mindedness typically in these conversations to the less woke side, because they understand that if they're not trying to be open-minded, that they're getting in deep trouble.
And you're on a college campus.
If you
go to a rural red state, you're going to have way less open-mindedness on the right side.
So in watching that, I was like, is this because selection bias of the type of person who stands here is really weak at arguing? Is because college kids have always been dumb?
Young people, well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it because I was that dumb when I was that age? Is it because we've stopped teaching critical thinking skills? I don't know what the reason is, but for whatever reason, it is remarkable and harrowing to watch. Again, it's just a small sample of people, but whoever is showing up to these things, what is your reason for doing this? He really does a pretty good job. Sometimes he gets a little snarky. He's like, I'm the most published researcher in the gender studies field, which is like, come on, my guy. Like, I know that's kind of true, but you're given a wrong impression of yourself. He's like, I'm actually a gender studies scholar, one of the most published, one of the top 10 in all history. And they're like, oh, wow.
He is. Yeah, all his publications are bullshit. All his studies are made up. But
well, again, that is a misrepresentation as far as I'm concerned, because that's not what they understand to mean. What he is saying is creating a false impression in their mind. But it's fascinating to watch them struggle and call him a transphobe and get, the one girl with the classic, and she snaps when the other girl makes a point. It is fascinating to watch how poorly people reason, how they cannot answer the question, why do you think this? How they cannot answer the question, what would it take for you to move to one line over? Their epistemology, the way that they come to their conclusions, is so broken. And particularly what is interesting is the woke ideology has its own set of built-in defenses against anyone questioning your epistemology, which isn't new. Religion has had this forever. Even the devil can quote scripture for his own purposes. If anybody tries to question you, they're testing you for the devil's purposes. All of these ideologies have built-in defense mechanisms against people trying to get you to think critically. But this one is, why are you even doing this? Who are you? This is violence. You're erasing, you know what I mean? Like, this question erases people's experience. They have these go-to lines that they go to defend against critical thinking that are unique to this particular ideology, but I suppose not new in the history of ideology. And it's, if you watch it, some of them will freak you out.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. One, most people are not smart. So I think their ability to even track your counter argument might be confusing to them. I think a lot of people tie their political beliefs to their identity, which means that they do feel attacked when you question a belief they have, instead of recognizing that this is how beliefs are meant to be formed and sharpened and changed. I also think for young, so there are adults who would fail this just as much on a sidewalk because they are simultaneously not intelligent and they have changing this belief would mean a dramatic change to their identity they're not willing to do because of their ego, whatever. But I also think if you're just young, even if you are well-intentioned and intelligent and open-minded, you may have not heard any intelligent counter arguments, and you may be in an echo chamber where everyone believes what you believe. And so it is obvious to you that what you believe is right because no one's ever said anything intelligent to the contrary. And so I think you develop an insane conviction, and then when you hear the reasons why you're wrong, you feel like you are being tricked because it doesn't make sense to you. Because I'm smart, no one has ever disagreed with me before in my echo chamber. Suddenly I feel like I'm in the wrong. I must be being word weaseled. I'm being bamboozled. So I think and also you hopefully do change your mind as you age. And so you would like to think that young people have the most incorrect beliefs just because they haven't had the most time to change relative to what they were raised with. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think it's probably most people, unfortunately, of all ages and of all political beliefs, just don't have sound reasons for why they believe what they believe.
Yeah. What you were saying reminds me that probably these people have never had modeled for them what it would look like for someone to handle cognitive dissonance in a calm, thoughtful manner. They've probably seen that maybe a handful of times in their life.
And then change their mind. Someone that they respect and look up to and have learned from, to be in a discussion and go, wait, that is actually a really good point I hadn't thought of. I can't think of why that wouldn't be the case. You may be right. Perhaps I'm holding the wrong opinion on this issue. Yeah. how many people have seen that from someone that they admire? I think few.
Yes.
Certainly not happening on YouTube.
Yeah, and he doesn't argue with them. He gives them the opportunity to discover that on their own, and they haven't in the videos that I've seen. They have not gotten there. He's been removed from campus on probably two or three out of 4 videos that I watched. Like, the teachers come out and explain how he's committing violence. Like, the teachers all get out and tell them, they use the word violence so liberally. I'm very curious if Brittany...
What's the channel name?
It's Peter Boghossian, I think. You know, if
check it out.
If Brittany Griner gets back from Russia, I'm curious how she uses the word violence. If it's still words that are disagree with her, or if it's...
Well, there's also, I think there's words that are pointed at you to hurt you, which may or may not be violence. But then there's also just words that are genuine questions. Yeah. Which it seems like, I get that can be a way to sneak in hate, but you'd like to think that you could have a conversation just full of genuine questions that wasn't considered violent.
That's fair. There's no charity extended. In fact, he's not perfect, but he does try to be blank slate. And what is most often projected on him is malice.
Yeah.
You are hateful. And now, granted, there is a degree to which he has a history of trying to make these types of people look dumb. So the radar isn't totally off. This is what he does is...
Well, no one can make you look dumb. They can only give you an opportunity to look dumb.
Fair enough. But yeah, so anyway, I know you had other things.
No, not much. I mean, the rest of the stuff, I don't know if we'll cut or what. It's literally just stuff I thought was interesting. So I like social research. I take it all with a grain of salt because replication studies have been tough to get the same results every time. But I found one that I thought was interesting, which is basically this researcher went to people who had given a random friend a phone call, someone that they were close to in college but hadn't spoken to in 6 months or a year. And then people had received those phone calls and said, how much do you think it meant to the person that you made that phone call? How much did it mean to you that they made that phone call? And they found that people dramatically underestimate how much people appreciate being reached out to by old friends. And I thought that was interesting, that when you're doing the phone call, you go, this person probably doesn't care to talk to me. And when you're receiving it, you go, oh, wow, I'm really appreciative that Charlie called me. And I just thought that was cool and worth letting people know.
I do wonder if I could imagine some of the psychological pressures that would be on people to, for instance, so the person, how much do you think that meant to them? You're going to be inclined to underreport so that you don't overextend yourself, act too self-important. You know what I mean? It would be a weird thing to be like, oh, that was a 10 out of 10 call for them. Like, they really valued that. That seems narcissistic and self-absorbed. And on the other side of it, there's probably a bit of pressure to inflate that number. So I wonder how out of whack those two things actually would be.
I wonder if that's... I see the first one. I actually think the second one might be unique to you potentially. I don't know that a lot of people would feel bad saying that that they didn't care that much.
People are so ridiculously polite to people's faces sometimes. You know what I mean?
Well, so the person's not there. Sorry, there's a researcher, but it's not like the person that called them is in the room.
They just don't know that. What did that call mean to you? Honestly, man, that was fucking wasting my time. That was like a -2. Yeah. There's no way.
You don't think people would say that?
No. Are you insane? I mean, I would never.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Researchers contacting me to ask. Oh my God, my alarm bells are going off.
That's what I'm saying. Crazy. I think this might be unique.
That was a 10 out of 10 call. I appreciated it so much. Thank you. Yeah, I'd suspect foul play.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying I think that may be
okay.
That may be a Charlie thing more so than a all people thing.
Sure. Well, yeah. Either way, call your old friends. I think it's good habits.
I thought it was interesting. Yeah, because I've I don't know. It matches my anecdotal experience as well of thinking that the outgoing calls are probably unimportant, but also appreciating the inbound calls. So maybe that's why I liked it. But yeah, the last thing I have is just there's no takeaway. I just think it's funny how sometimes these urban legends make it through middle schools and high schools somehow across the country, and then everyone has the same opinion and they're wrong. You played sports as a kid. Did you ever have a coach tell you don't put your hands on your knees when you're catching your breath? Put your hands on top of your head and stand up
Yeah,
straight.
yeah, I've told us that in gym class.
Yeah, gym class. If you're on the soccer team or whatever, basketball team, you run suicides, and they say, don't bend over. You get more oxygen if you stand up. Fight that. That's weakness. Totally not true. They did a study of how much oxygen you get in each position, and what do you know? The natural instinct that you have, which also matches what you see Kobe and MJ and all the other professional athletes do when they're tired, is the best for you. And for some reason, every gym teacher and high school coach across America just got this weird idea in their head that you shouldn't let kids put their hands on their knees to catch their breath.
After you ran it was the 600 in elementary school before it was the mile in like high school. They were like, put your hands on your head.
Yeah, but everybody's
don't sit down.
Like even professional NFL players and NBA players were saying like that. My coach told me this too. Like it made it across America. I don't know why or how, but I just thought it was funny, and it's just a good reminder that sometimes you're just getting a ton of misinformation when you're 14 from an adult who has no reason to have authority over something, but they're your teacher at your random public school. And
one day you'll be that adult. One day you'll be that adult spewing bullshit to kids.
So I just thought that was funny. I was like, oh, good to know. I will not
advise that anymore.
Tell that to kids when they're bent over catching their breath.
Sure.
That's it. That's all I got for today.
Very good. What do we got?
Question I have is, I've been in a relationship for about 2 months with somebody who has had a positive influence in my life and who meets all the criteria that I'm looking for in a woman, and she feels the same way.
Cool.
Our relationship is open, calm, and communicative, and we aren't afraid to speak our minds about anything. Both of us have been in long-term relationships, with hers being a 10-year that ended recently in divorce. We understand what works and does not work in a relationship, as well as the nuances that could arise in this relationship. When we began dating, she had a dog that she shared with her ex-husband who lived in our area 1 week on and 1 week off. I personally don't like living with dogs and don't ever want to live with one. Additionally, I'm highly allergic to cats and dogs, so I'm careful who I stay with. I've been at her place as our relationship developed, and I thought that I could get used to the dog, but its constant need for attention has strained our relationship. The dog follows us everywhere and always wants to be involved in whatever we do at home. This has strengthened my feelings about not wanting to live with a pet, especially one that requires so much attention. It feels like we can't relax or be alone unless we go into another room or close the door. Our conversations on this issue have been frequent since we began dating because the ex-husband moved out of the area midway through the relationship, so the dog now lives with her 24/7. Although she was initially hesitant to take on the dog because of her active lifestyle, she feels obligated to because she does not want it to go to a stranger. Adding a dog into the mix kind of slows down our relationship because we both live an active lifestyle and are spontaneous in our activities. When I look at it from my perspective, I'm thinking about the present and future of our relationship. Temporary fixes are fine, but I don't want to live with an animal in the long run. A compromise is obviously necessary here, but at what cost? She has provided solutions for distancing the dog, like making sure it doesn't sleep in the bed when I'm there overnight and stopping it from jumping up and licking whenever I kiss or hug her. What do you guys think about the situation?
I think that dogs are like mini children and should be, this sincerity of the incompatibility should be treated as such. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't know where she stands and like desperately needing and wanting this dog. But certainly if you were like, kids slow down relationships, they get in the way of everything, and she's got this kid, I'd be like, okay, that's an incompatibility that can't be bridged. The questions that
put the kid down.
you could give it to a neighbor.
Yeah, you could put the kid in the shelter.
So for the dog, I'd have a handful of questions, which is like, is this the last pet she ever plans on having? Number one.
Still might live another 10 years.
Yeah. Well, okay. Then it would be, how old is this pet? Because one option is just like, last this one out, don't like it, but this is a lifetime with this person, and you're willing to take 5 years with a dog that is less than ideal, and she doesn't want another dog after this. And
do either of them have kids? Did they say in the question?
I don't think they had kids.
She was in a marriage previously.
Yeah,
10 years.
10 years.
They didn't mention any kids. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, but I do think this is something that you could. It wouldn't be crazy to split about this if your opinions on it were very different. Meaning she's a pet person and you're not a pet person. I think that's close to wanting kids and not wanting kids in the amount that it seems to negatively impact you and would be a need to have for somebody else. So given that, you could break up, or you could be like, definitely clarify her future plans regarding pets, figure out how old this animal is, and ask yourself, I do think as a pet owner, sort of like as a parent, unless you have a really good option to give the dog to someone else, you have an obligation and a responsibility to take care of this animal for the duration of its life. And so I don't think the idea that unless she can give it to someone who is like knows the dog, is a loving family.
You might want to keep the dog though.
Yeah.
I didn't get the sense she doesn't like the dog.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that I don't think it's like her saying no, I'm not going to give this dog up is like a crazy stance to take, even if she didn't want to keep it.
They've been together for 2 months. They said
They've been together for about 2 months. Yep.
I mean, assuming that this person didn't hate the dog and take it purely out of guilt, I would take it a huge red flag if they were willing to get rid of their dog for you after 2 months. You said, I asked her to get rid of the dog, and she just put it down. I'd be like, this is a terrible person to date.
Yeah.
Like, that's their dog. So yeah, I don't know. This is just a thing like any other relationship thing, I think, where you're going to have to sort out how much you want to be with the person versus how much you can't compromise on this. Like, can you learn to like the dog or train the dog to not jump on you? Can you find someone you love just as much who doesn't own a dog? I can't tell you which is right. There's a lot of solutions to this. It's the good news. So you can just pick the one that the most appeals to you.
Yeah. One option is training. Like get a professional.
Yeah, you could train the dog. Yeah. You could find someone to date that doesn't have a dog. You could date this person but see them a lot less and ask them to come to your place and get a dog sitter, and you guys can hang out once a week without the dog.
But if these things are immovable, this could be break up with reason. I don't think that's crazy because
that's what I said.
These are different.
That was my number 2 option. Was just find someone to date who doesn't have a dog.
Mm-hmm. And so you'll need to go through those specifics and those mitigating potentials and decide if those are right or if this is a deal breaker. So
examine what happened to your cold black heart that you don't like dogs. There's a lot of options. No, it's no wrong answer. It's just what do you have a thing that you're butting heads against your girlfriend, and you just have to figure out how to compromise around it, or if it's something you want to break up about.
Cool.
Nice. We're moving on to Patreon.
All right. Cool. What do we got?
We're going to talk about the likeliness of societal collapse, defining your nemesis, and the ethics of getting into real estate.
Cool. All right. All very different. Yeah. So if you guys want to check that out, it's our main source of funding for the podcast. It's basically 80-90% of it comes from Patreon at this point. A little bit from Red Circle as well.
Also, I'll give you a teaser. Likelihood of societal collapse, strong. If you want to find out why, join the Patreon.
But no, we do need it. At this point, because our AdSense, we're not doing a lot of the interviews, which sometimes boost our ad revenue. Patreon is what keeps us going, and we are hitting critical numbers that are close to not being able to keep going. So if you do want to see the podcast continue, we need our patrons, and we appreciate all of our patrons, and you get this whole other thing that we do afterwards.
Yeah, at this point, it's this additional doubling of the length of the podcast, basically, every week.
Cool. So we love and appreciate all of you. We'll see the rest of you on Patreon.